Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have today, this is very exciting. I've been really looking forward to this. Dr. Randa Slim is the program lead for the Middle East program at the Stimson Center. The Stimson Center I've become familiar with. It is an outstanding public policy operation, and I happen to know the guy that runs the thing, and Randa's one of his stars. Randa, talk to us about your back. Rather than me going through a big bio here. So you were born in Beirut, Lebanon.
First, good to be with you, Governor.
Thank
And
you.
I'm joining you from Kettering, Ohio.
There you
And
go.
so I was born in Beirut, Lebanon. I came to study in the United States for my graduate work in 1984. My first job out of grad school was with the Kettering Foundation in Centerville, Ohio. The Kettering Foundation and I joined them to work in their international program, which is they were at the time leading one of the best what we call track two. Track one, diplomatic programs. Track one, diplomacy is the governments, what governments do. Track two, it's what people, think tankers, former officials, academics participate in. And the Kettering Foundation was leading and one of the premier track two program in the country at the time between the United States and the Soviet Union, started in the 60s by President Eisenhower and Soviet Premier Khrushchev, with the idea that in the midst of the Cold War, you need to have a space where citizens from the two countries could meet. And in the beginning, it was dancers, artists, writers meeting together across the Cold War divide. And Kettering Foundation kept with this program for a long time until recently. And then after that, I joined the Middle East Institute after the in Washington, D.C., which is a think tank focusing on the Middle East. And then from there, I went to Wilson Center for a period. And then from the Wilson Center to now Stimson.
And you were at Johns Hopkins as well, right?
I am still a senior fellow in their Foreign Policy Institute at Johns Hopkins SAIS, School of Advanced International Studies. Yes.
Well, there's so many things that I'd like to talk to you about Beirut, Lebanon, and other such and such, but let's focus on Iran now because it's funny, Doctor, that it seems as though the media has not focused much on this. I don't know why that is. Maybe because of Minnesota. It's starting to get a little bit more coverage, but I think it's important for Americans to understand what to make of this whole situation. Where do you think we are today in terms of Iran?
It's very important to contextualize this protest that happened and this uprising, which for now it has ended, but it has ended with a bloodshed. The kind of violence that the Iranian regime has meted against its citizens this time, against this protest, is unlike anything that the Iranians have seen. Remember, the country right now, since January 8th, is under total internet shutdown. So whatever information we are getting through people that have access through Starlinks, that left the country and have been able to talk with journalists and talk with people, and some people who are also talking, every now and then with their relatives back home. So the bloodshed that Iran has just seen since January 8th is unlike anything they have seen. The numbers of dead is estimated among the protesters between 12,000 to 20,000. The number of people that are held in jail, 18,000. This protest started in late December, by the merchants in the bazaar, because in protest to the devaluation of the rial, of the Iranian currency, and because of major, issues that the government, especially like mismanagement of water resources. The capital, Tehran of Iran, was running of water because mostly of corruption and mismanagement by the regime. And so people had lots of reasons to protest. But this is one of many protests since 1999. There have been student protests in 1999, other protests in 2017, 2022, 2029. 2022, 2023, and now 2025, 2026. And so and I think with this protest, what we are seeing now is the gap between the government and the people is widening. With every single protest, it widens even further. Now they have been able to put the protest down. So people are saying that, pretty much people are no more back in the streets, partly because of fear of being killed, by the regime forces, and partly because, they feel, to be very honest, let down by us, because President Trump said, recently he said to the protesters, help is on the way, and help did not come to their rescue. So people are feeling let down.
Randa, what do you think the options were for the United States to do something to support the protesters?
First, I think any president, US president, should, and Obama committed similar mistake in Syria in 2012, I think. A president, when there is a uprising, citizen uprising overseas, I think should not lock himself, hopefully in the future herself, in a red line. Obama locked himself in a red line in 2012, 2013 in Syria by saying, if you regime, at the time, Assad regime uses chemical weapons against your people, we're going to come after you. The regime used chemical weapon not once, many times, and tested the Obama administration many times. And then eventually President Obama decided not to intervene. And right now, when President Trump said to the protesters, especially on January 8th, help is on the way, people went into the streets thinking that help was going to be on the way. The words of an American president mean a lot to people, especially in the Middle East. And so what are our objectives? Basically, the question for me is, what are our objectives? What are our strategic objectives in Iran? Is it regime change? If it is regime change, then we need to be ready to be wedded to a long-term campaign that brings to the fore many tools that are at our disposal in order to help this regime to fall. And that's going to be not tomorrow, not in the next 6 months. This regime is resilient, and it has tools still at its disposal to maintain its resilience. We can use cyber. We can help people avert or go around the internet shutdown so that we can prevent the regime from engaging in another.
Starlink would be a good
Starlink terminal. We flood Iran with Starlink terminals. We need to reinvigorate again our media communication that we used to have, and what
Voice of America
diminished by Doge, Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, Radio Farda, which broadcast into Iran. Remember, these were important media during the Cold War to help people who were under communist rule to really be exposed to what we were thinking as a country, and and to help them organize as well, and to help think through how to organize. And then we have to engage in tougher sanction than we already have against regime officials, and we have to work with our allies in order, and then we have to help the opposition organize itself. There is a divided opposition. That's a problem right now, is that you have many nodes of Iranian opposition inside the country, outside the country, but they are not organized. They don't have a united political machinery. And you, Governor, knows more than anybody, the importance of having an on-the-ground organization to bring people together, to help them organize. This does not exist right now.
What is the opposition's purpose, and how many points of the opposition are there? I mean, do they just want to? What would their goal be? How many different groups do they all want regime change? Because there's many different groups that want different things, right? So what is it that they essentially want?
I mean, one thing is that the regime still has a strong support base. So this support base does not want regime change, of course, is happy with this regime. Maybe they are not happy with the tools that the regime used to maintain, to survive, but they are still loyal to the regime. And that's still a strong support base, and that explains their resilience. And it's very important for the opposition to be able to reach out into this base and start basically, inciting defections within the space, right? That's so in terms of opposition. So you have the internal opposition, which consists of people who, used to be with the regime, no longer with the regime. academics, students, lots of students. Most of the youth, basically are and they have been leading the protest for a long time against the regime. You have some clerics who basically are opposed to the regime. So not all the clerical establishment in Iran is with the regime. That's the internal. You have labor unions. You have now the merchants, the Bazari, which is a very important constituency for the regime. And now it's starting to rebel against the regime because of the deterioration in the economic conditions. On the outside, you have a number of people who used to be with the Shah in the old days before 1979 and their descendants. You have basically a lot of academics here. And you have, of course, the crown prince, the son of the former Shah who was deposed, who left Iran when he was 17 years old in 1979, has not stepped foot in Iran since then, and has proven, unfortunately, to be a divisive figure in this country. Instead of being a uniter of the external opposition, he has not succeeded in uniting the external opposition. To the contrary, he has divided the external opposition by his messaging and his positioning.
Why would there be people who are loyal to the regime when they see the kind of, unbelievable killing of these people, particularly a lot of young people, a lot of women? Why are people loyal to the regime?
Partly ideology. There are people who strongly believe in the ideological underpinning of the regime. Partly it is there
Which
are
would be
employees
what?
of the regime,
Which would be what?
which is
Doctor?
Islamic Shi'ism, and it is
Okay.
one school of jurisprudence within Islamic Shia.
Right.
In Islam, you have mainly two main
Right.
divisions. You have the Sunnah and you have the Shia. And within the Shia, you have a number of schools of jurisprudence. One of them is what is called Wilayat al-Faqih, which means, translate into English, the rule of the jurisprudent. And this was propagated by the late Imam Khomeini, who was, the founder of this current regime and led the revolution against the Shah in 1979. But the revolution in 1979, when it worked, and the way Khomeini was in the beginning able to succeed, is that he brought under this big umbrella, that he was leading, leftist, student, protester, and eventually, once he came back to Iran, he basically executed a lot of the leftists, a lot of these people, and then it was a clerical rule. So you have the ideological underpinnings. You have people who are paid by the regime. You have members of the security services who know maybe, especially the top leadership, and that has been the problem. This revolution or whatever uprising in the future will not be able to succeed. One, the opposition has to be unified, has to have an on-the-ground operation. It has to be unified internally, externally. It has to have a common leadership. But more importantly, it has to be able to incentivize defection within the political leadership of the regime and within the security leadership of the regime. And so far, despite all these protests since 1979, since 1999, even including this last one, we have not seen defections from the ranks of the regime, whether it is the political rank or whether it is the security rank.
Or the IRG.
Yeah, the IRGC, of course. The main pillar, because, that's what makes this regime survive and be resilient. It has, over the years, developed this network and embedded it of paramilitary, military organizations, some of which their sole purpose, like the IRGC, like the Basij, their sole function is to protect the regime and to ensure its survival. And the IRGC has proven, because the IRGC was sent to help Assad in Syria to survive. We have seen what they have done in Syria, ready to use any tool at their disposal, any force to prop up Assad. And they've done the same thing. And in my opinion, the way they behaved in the last 5-6 days is basically lessons learned from Syria. We have to go with brutality, we have to go with force in order to nip this in the bud.
So I've got so many questions here. First of all, I noticed that our friends, if we want to, I would use it in loose terms, in the Middle East have been cautioning the U.S. against intervening directly. Why?
we're talking about different friends. We are talking about the Israelis, who, in my opinion,
Well, I'm
have the
talking about
most.
the Saudis. I'm talking
And
about,
I'm coming to them. And
yeah.
so we have the Israelis, who have the most eyes on the ground in Iran, inside Iran. And then you have the Gulfis, you have the Saudis, you have the Qataris, you have the Kuwaitis, the Bahrainis. The Emiratis have not taken a firm stand vis-a-vis what's happening in. So the three countries that have been leading and basically lobbying with the Trump administration not to intervene and to give Iran what's reported as give Iran another chance are the Saudis, are the Qataris, and the Turks. And it's partly because a weaker Iran serves their interest, and they are afraid that if there is if this uprising were to succeed, in the absence of a unified opposition and a unified opposition leader, that the country is most likely to basically fall into civil chaos, civil war, and that's going to create a lot of instability in their neighborhood. And they always refer to Iraq. They said, look what happened to Iraq. There was an intervention by the American. Saddam Hussein was replaced. And what happened? Civil war for many years. And Iraq is barely now trying to put its act together. And they said in Iran, it's going to be even worse because you have a lot of ethnic groups, including Kurds, including Arabs, including Baloch, who are, Azeris, who, especially the Kurds, they are heavily armed. And if there is a division in the center, the fear is that a lot of these ethnic identity groups are going to start clamoring for their own independence, and then the country is going to go into a major civil war, again creating instability in the neighborhood. Israel is a different story. I think it's reported they have been encouraging the Trump administration not to go, not to support, not to do any kind of kinetic action against the Iranian regime right now. Partly because they feel that they are going to retaliate, the Iranians, and they have threatened, and that the target of retaliation is going to be Israel, and they are not in a position right now to deal with it or to want to have that kind of retaliation on their territory.
When we look at Iraq right now, which may serve as an interesting, that's a bad word, could serve as an example of what can happen when you break strongman control. So we've got Sunni, we've got Shia, and we've got Kurds. Now the Kurds, it's been a while since I thought about this. The Kurds are in the north, and they're pretty well isolated. Is that correct? What's the status in Iraq right now?
Well, Iraq now is a half full, half empty glass story, in terms of a country that has elections regularly on a regular basis, that has power being changed, every 4 years, the evolution of power regularly, that without violence. I think Iraq offers a hopeful story in that respect. But at the same time, Iraq is driven by internal divisions, not only between Kurds and the center, because while the constitution of 2005 established a federal system in Iraq to preserve the right of the Kurds and normalize the relationship between the Kurdish entity and the center in Baghdad, that federalism was really never, was never allowed to reach its full potential, right? There are still many laws that, according to this constitution, need to be passed that have not been passed. So Iraq, again, on one hand has been a success, but on the other hand, Iraq still has a lot of issues, in dealing with its different components. But more importantly, it has not been able to diversify its economy. The budget in Iraq is still 98 to 95% dependent on oil. And as the oil prices keep going down, I think Iraq is heading toward a major storm, going forward, that will have a lot of social repercussions. And the other problem with Iraq is what Iran is doing. They have still in Iraq, they have armed militia that are loyal to Iran, that are beholden to Tehran in terms
Shia,
of their
right?
decision
They're,
making. Shia, yes,
yeah.
Shia, and they are part of this movement that came together in 2014 to fight ISIS, right? The Hasht, it's called the Hasht. And part of the Hasht are militias that are beholden to Tehran and operate according to the whims and the agenda of Tehran.
You know, we don't want to lose people here because it gets complicated. But as I recall, Doctor, you know, when we talk about, and this is something people don't think much about in the U.S., the difference between Shia and Sunni. The Shia being viewed as the more radical. But based on, was it the assassination of Ali back in what, the
Correct.
14th century?
Correct. Correct.
Talk to us just a bit about that so people can understand the difference between Shia, and Sunni, because there is, you know, it's significant, and it because it does get to some people to be motivated along those religious lines, right?
Yeah, but when we talk also about radicalism, remember ISIS is pretty radical, and you know it's a terrorist organization, and they are Sunni. So I think radicalism and terrorism is not how to say it applies to everybody almost. You know, I mean it's not religious background, but it started as a political division. Who's going to succeed the Prophet in the leadership of the Ummah, which is the Ummah meaning the how to say the people of Islam who follow Islam, and so the idea was going to be and Ali was the son-in-law of the Prophet, married to his daughter, and it was then at the time decided that no, it was going to be somebody else to follow follow in the Prophet footstep as the leader of the Ummah, and it took like two more caliphs or leaders for Ali to become the leader of the Ummah. And after that, based on that political division, you started having rituals, you started having schools of thought that emanated from the political division and tried to provide religious justification, religious underpinning for this political division. And then you had different groups. In Iran, you have the father of the late Shah, who basically brought Iran into Shi'ism. And you have in Shia Islam, you have many levels of Shia Islam depending on where you are in terms of which imam, because you have in Shia Islam, you have
Right.
the imam, meaning the leader, starting with Ali, going through his two sons, right? And then going through and their descendants until you hit the 12th imam, who is the hidden. We call it the hidden imam. And many people in Iran think Khomeini was the hidden imam or Khamenei was the hidden imam.
Right.
And everybody, and so depending on that, and so you had the division. So the majority of Muslims, the great majority of Muslims are Sunni. Shia are a minority within Islam, and they are mostly the majority of Shia of Muslims in Iran. Great majority are Shia, although you have Arab origin who are Sunni. You have Kurds who are Sunni. You have also Kurds who are Shia, and they're called Failis. In Lebanon, all the Shia the Muslims are divided equally between Sunni and Shia, for example.
Yeah, I think we've totally confused people now but it is so complicated and it's worth trying to understand. Let me ask this question. When we think about Iran and over a long period of time, I've been told by people who used to live there, who now live in the US, whatever, that the people there like the United States. Okay, and this might be one of the problems that we have. The people really do like us over there. The young people yearn for freedom and all that. Is that what do you have to say about that? Is that true or false?
Totally
Totally false?
I mean, no, totally true. Totally
really?
True. I think this is, despite this clerical regime, it's one of the most secular societies that strongly believes in basically don't want the mosque to intervene in how they run their lives. They want to have their freedom to dance, to sing, to marry whoever they want, to live their life. It's especially among the youth. And that's why you see the youth are the ones who are leading the protest, the youth who are dying, most of the, I'm willing to bet of the 12,000 to 20,000, we don't have the exact number of those who have been killed in the last 5 days. The great majority are young people, who feel that, it's up to them to gain a better life. Iran is as a society in its majority is highly secular. And so the picture that we see from Iran are the women in the black chador, are the clerics who are, with the stern faces, who are threatening, the United States, threatening Israel. But the majority of Iranians are fun-loving people. I've never been in a gathering with Iranians where there's no song. Everybody wants to sing, everybody wants to dance. Really, I'm always amazed by how long this regime has been able to survive, given what I know about the Iranian society and the Iranian people. It's just amazing. And it's basically, it's a system and a regime of fear. They have been able, we used to call the Saddam Hussein regime in Iraq the Republic of Fear. This is a regime of fear. And Assad was the same thing in Syria. People were afraid, of their neighbors, afraid of each other, afraid of the government, afraid of the security services. And that's how this regime can survive. But you know what? I'm willing to bet within the next 2-3 years, there will not be the same kind of regime in Iran. It's going to change. Is it going to be much better than what we have today? I don't know. But it's not going to be the same regime that we have today. The gap, the chasm between people and the regime and the government is so wide now. And with every bloodshed that this regime does, that chasm widens and deepens. And it's going to be very hard for them. And they don't have other means to basically placate the people's anger. That's all they have, terror. That's all they have. Because they don't have the economic means to answer the economic deprivation people feel. And they know that the regime cannot survive in a spirit of transparency and political openness. And so the only way they can keep the people down is by killing their youth and by keeping them down through fear.
So if, aside from the use of Voice of America, Starlink, cyber, more sanctions, or actually to enforce the sanctions and not let the ships move out carrying the oil.
Correct.
But you wouldn't like the idea of a direct military intervention in that, would you?
I'm to be very honest, I'm into conflict resolution, but at the same time, I think that sometimes, the use of military, sometimes is warranted, right? Of a military action. And let me give you the example and why I'm saying, I'm not decided about this. In 2013, when President Obama supposedly threatened the Syrian regime at the time, to go after their military installations, right? To go and destroy the helicopters that were at the time dropping barrel bombs on people's head and killing civilians by the thousands. And then he decided at the last minute not to do it. Now, since the regime has fallen in Syria, we have been able to talk with some of the people who were in that circle around Assad, some of them, and to just figure out, including even the Russians, to figure out what was the feeling at the time, And I think retroactively, when I spoke with former Obama official, they said they did not have enough intel to tell what was going to happen if they attacked. And now what we are seeing is that there was a real serious chance that there would have been serious defections in the military ranks and in the political ranks if that attack was carried out in 2013. And think about how many thousands of people could have been prevented if those defections happened and the regime fell in 2013. I think we are facing a similar situation and that's, I think, the debate right now in the administration and the debate between especially the Israeli intel, the American intel. Okay, will kinetic actions, will a military attack on the installation of the IRGC, on the, for example, will it promote defections within the IRGC, which is the pillar of the resistance for the regime? I think that's the debate now, and will it do that? And there are pros and cons, but
as you
again,
know, doctor, and you can look all over the world, Sudan, all kinds of places where bad things happen. In places in China.
yeah.
I mean,
So
you can look
Libya,
everywhere.
we
Yeah,
did intervene.
yeah, yeah,
We did intervene, and what happened? Chaos.
yeah. So
Yes,
what I'm saying is, you know, the real question is, what's the direct threat to the United States? I mean, our hearts bleed for people who were there. I mean, the thought of them just shooting them in the back of the head, which we
correct.
read are those reports. But where should the United States spend its blood? And that's why when I look at issues like the cyber, when I look at the blockades and all that, and remember in Syria, and it's easy now that it's over to go and ask people, well,
Yeah,
what would you
yeah,
have done? And
yeah.
but now Syria is different
Yes,
because internally they fixed it, or I mean, they've
yes.
improved it. Maybe that's the same thing that has to happen in Iran because what do we do once we go? Do we look? I was there in the early 1980s when we had Marines in Lebanon, and what happened?
Yeah, yeah. You're right. You're right. No, that's why I said I don't know. I
Yeah,
haven't decided. I haven't made up my mind. I'm thinking about the pros and the cons,
right.
and is there, and that's why in the beginning I told you, Governor, it was a mistake for President Trump to basically, in my opinion, to say to the people, help is on the way. You don't create this kind of optimism that got people into the streets, in the way that they would have gone in the street, in my opinion, no matter what. But you don't give false hope to people unless you are willing to follow it up with action. The same thing with President Obama. You don't put a red line unless you
Yes.
enforce it. I think that
Or
takes away your deterrence.
maybe you don't need to say anything. Maybe if all of a sudden, and I'm not quite sure how Starlink works, how easy it is to get it into the country. I know that's small, so it may be manageable to airdrop Starlink in. Maybe, and it's certainly possible to do cyber to restore the internet using our technology today. I think it is, and at the same time, the ability to really to really enforce the sanctions. Just don't put sanctions on, but enforce them. All those things are help to those who are protesting, as opposed to Marines sort of landing somewhere, right, and fighting their way in and then running the country and all the
Yeah.
chaos that comes.
And the difference, I think, between Iran and Syria is that in Syria you had the neighbors working with the opposition. So you had the Qataris funding some of the opposition. You have the Saudis funding some of the opposition, and they were able to base themselves out of Turkey, which is next to Syria. In Iran, the question is none of the neighbors in the Gulf are interested in funding the opposition. The only country that's interested in funding the opposition is Israel. And any opposition inside Iran that's funded by Israel is going to be used part of the narrative of the regime, which they've already deployed. Remember, this is not a real uprising. This is all manufactured. All of this. I mean, Khamenei called them rioters, and now they are talking about a U.S.-Israeli plot to divide the country. And that appeals to the base of the regime and to the
Right.
people around that base, the independents, if we can call them, who are afraid of chaos and civil war, and who are not necessarily with the regime, but they are also afraid, okay, what's the alternative to the regime? In the absence of an opposition, we can unify around.
So, with the bitterness that has come, mostly thinking about 2022 and and what has just happened, people, there is a deep bitterness towards the regime in neighborhoods with families. It's not going to go away because
Exactly.
this is a
Exactly.
brutality that
Exactly.
is, in the 21st century is kind of, in many respects unimaginable.
Correct.
I just have a sense. I mean, do you think, I know, let's not say 2 years or 3 years, but, and you say the regime will be different. Do you think that the regime could be toppled from within?
It could be not toppled as much as changed. And again,
I'm sorry,
I think
we
this
didn't hear you
regime,
when you
it
said that.
cannot, yeah. Oh, this regime, let's start with this. This regime unable to reform itself. It's unable. So what I can see is that if I can see eventually a scenario where the costs for the people in the upper security echelons and political echelons, the cost for them to stick with the regime become too high to bear because of sanctions, because I mean, for example, we just sanctioned the Secretary General of the Supreme National Security Council of Iran that makes all these decisions along with the leader. I mean, why did we wait until now to sanction the guy? Why was this guy not sanctioned beforehand? Well beforehand. And there are many people like him who are not sanctioned yet. So we need to up the ante in terms of sending the message, making it very costly for the people, again, at the top, to stick with the regime. And then once defections start happening, then you are going to see movement from within the regime to come up with a new formula. I don't see this country, I mean, Iran, moving into a democracy in the next
Right.
5 years. I don't see that happening. But I can see a prolonged period of transition with some instability. I can say easily people from the Revolutionary Guard saying basically, to heck with it, we are going to take over. We will put a figurehead as a leader, but we will run the show. And
Right.
they will try to strike a
Excuse me.
deal with the United States. I can see that happening within the next, maybe even a year to 3 years. It can happen.
All right. You've been generous with your time, and we can't, this is not the end of our discussions here, Doctor, if I could be so bold. We're just going to have to keep talking. And I just want people to get a decent understanding of what is happening because it is important. And it's important what we do and and it's important what our strategy is and how we handle this in such a way that we preserve human rights and at the same time not put ourselves in a quagmire of something we really don't understand. Because as you went through your description of all the imams and all this and all the different levels of Shiism, you think we're ready to go in there and understand that? I don't think so. So we have a
No.
ways to go. But I think there are a number of things that we could do and could do now that may not be announced, shouted from the rooftops, but would send a signal to people in Iran that America cares and that we're somehow offering the support that they need.
I think this change has to come from within, and it's important for us not to pick winners. Who's going to win this fight? I
Right.
think the Iranians have to settle this among themselves. We can support the opposition, as you put it, and we have the means to support the opposition, but it's up to the Iranians to pick their winner.
I want to thank you. Thanks for
Thank you.
taking the time, and you're a special lady, and thank you. And I'm glad that you're involved in so many of these things because you're making a difference. God bless.
Thank you very much,
All right.
Governor. Thank you.
Thank
It's
you.
a pleasure. Thank
All
you.
right.